Sykes for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and looking forward to discussing some of the local projects that we have in my community in Ohio's 13th Congressional District, and thank you, one, for your patience and your time today, to all of our witnesses. So as I said, I'm from Ohio's 13th District in Northeast Ohio, and we have areas like Peninsula, Boston Township, Boston Heights, and the residential areas neighboring the Cauga Valley National Park. These areas are expanding, which is fantastic because it's the best place on earth, of course. But this level of expansion does require smaller communities to modernize their water systems to provide accessible and affordable water and sewer services to their residents. And it helps to incentivize businesses to move into and invest in the communities. But we know how hard it is for a municipality, especially small ones, to acquire their own water treatment facilities. And I often tell a story about a local mayor when I was first elected, and I asked him, what can I do to help? And he looked at me, he said, I don't know, because no one's ever asked me that question. In a couple of months, he figured it out and has been asking me, thankfully, for a lot of support, which had mostly been around water and sewer projects. And so in 2024, I was able to secure two water authorizations, one for Summit County and one for Stark County. And despite these efforts, my appropriation requests for these were not included in this year's appropriations. I understand my grievance regarding appropriations is not adequate for this particular panel or committee, but it is still worth stating that when in a community who expects these resources to come, who quite literally said, no one has ever asked me how I can help you, we provide the help, but then they're not funded, it's pretty devastating and unfortunate. And so my question for you, Ms. Uffner, is, I know you're mostly non-federal sponsors of Corps engineer projects, but can you talk a little bit about how critical the funding part is? I mean, it's great that we authorize the language, but the funding, I see Mr. Jones, you're nodding too, so please jump in after Ms. Uffner.
Yes, the funding is important. I do want to take a step back here because this is one of the things that we really hear commonly with our non-federal sponsors or potential non-federal sponsors. We got money in WRDA, when are we going to get it? And I really think it's partially an educational process, taking a step back on behalf of all of us, saying, okay, we got money in WRDA, now we have to go to appropriations and really frame all over again why this project's so important to the community.
Mr. Jones, thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. You saw me nodding there. Yeah, look, obviously the difference in our authorization and appropriation is critical, right? And most Americans don't realize that construction new start, appropriations is another significant hurdle that can take years, sometimes decades after a project is authorized. And so there's a false sense of hope that once an authorization is cleared and there's opportunities to talk about that with the public expects that that project is going to construction oftentimes months after that authorization. And that's oftentimes not the case, right, as you've alluded to. These authorizations sometimes result in inhibiting projects from being funded from other sources, and I think that's an opportunity for this committee to consider in WRDA 2026. In other cases, authorizations actually prohibit funds from other sources being directed towards that project, particularly around mitigation, funding sources coming from FEMA or CDBG, disaster recovery, Department of Agriculture, and so forth. And finally, there should be an incentive, I believe, to commit other sources of funds, whether federal or non-federal, to these projects in order to ultimately achieve the schedule that's desired and expected by the public.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you both for answering that question because it just goes to show how complicated this is. And I've heard several of my colleagues complain about the bureaucracy of this process, which is really harming and raising the cost of many. I'll very quickly turn everyone's attention. And Mr. Camillo, I have a question for you. The city of Massillon, which is in my district, they have repeatedly, and I have repeatedly discussed in the subcommittee, desperate funding needs for a sluice gate replacement. Again, I know this is not an appropriations committee, but still in that bureaucracy, we have been having a hard time getting answers for them to be assisted. And quite literally, I'm not willing to stand by and wait for a disaster. So, Mr. Camillo, you have a lot of experience with these types of infrastructure, this type of infrastructure. What are your insights as to what my community could experience in the event that this is not taken care of?
The appropriations process is always a challenge because of prioritization, and there's only so much funding to go around. We recommend a lot of times for our local levy districts to see what's available through the states. For fixing gates, the local state FEMA is sometimes of assistance to those. There's other programs within the state that we have them reach out and try until the federal process comes through.
Thank you for extending me a little extra time. I yield back.